I'm going to talk about some different ways of looking at things. I love George Box's work. He passed away about 4 or 5 years ago. He was at MIT, Massachusetts Institute for Technology, American statistician, deep thinker. I hold this all the time, this thought. All models are flawed, right? So it doesn't matter which perspective you're looking at it. So how many people here in HR? Okay, who's in IT? All right, AI, WXYZ. No, okay. That's the thing is that we learn these models in school. Our fields have these models, but what I see is that people who work in KM, knowledge management, have different models from people who work in L&D, learning and development, who have different models from human resources. Some of those models are useful, but we have to hold them very, very loosely and be ready to discard them when they are no longer useful. So we have to keep questioning our models, right? So I'm going to show you some models, going to talk about some. They may be useful, they may not. If they're not useful, don't listen to them. Okay, I want to talk about some, what I think are really important concepts today, and that sometimes people get confused about them and they can lead us astray. Complicated or complex, okay? I think in German you have similar terms, right? Yeah, so they are. So generally speaking, something that's complicated has lots of pieces, right? But you can know the whole thing. It's what's called a bounded system. So I worked in aviation training, so I developed helicopter training. A helicopter is complicated. There's lots and lots of pieces, but if you analyze it enough, you can figure out how all the pieces work together. The avionics system, the aviation system, flight control system, all those kinds of things. That's complicated. So think about a job, a janitor. You have the cleaner. Is that a complicated or complex job? Anybody want to venture a guess or not? Who thinks it's complicated? Who thinks it's complex? Who's too scared to raise their hand? Okay, got most of you. Well, if you think about it, is that the way that the job requirement is written for a janitor, it sounds like it's between simple and complicated, not too complicated, right? It's you have to wash the floors, you have to scrub the walls, you have to take out the garbage, you have to do those things. And if you read most job competency models for janitor, it doesn't look like it's very complex. Well, Barry Schwartz, so Schwartz as in written in the German way, did a really interesting TED Talk a number of years ago. You can search for it, and the first 5 minutes he talks about this. But one of the things that the talk is about wisdom, and he was talking about they were working in a hospital. And they were looking at how the work was done, and management saw the janitor's role as simple, complicated, right? But they interviewed the janitors. And the janitors saw their job as complex. Why? Well, there was the fellow who was in, there was a dying boy in the room, and he cleaned the room completely, but the father had not seen the janitor clean the room, and the father went to the janitor and he said, "My God, my son's room's not clean, clean it." He didn't say a word, he cleaned it all over again, because it was about a relationship with people. The European model, Claire Brandt, who was the first indigenous psychiatrist in Canada. He was a research psychiatrist. And he wrote very good papers and did presentations about 30 years ago. And he talked about the difference between shaping or modeling. And he said the European model, which comes from the Prussians, and we're not that far from Prussia, right, is that we shape people. We have training programs. You're going to do this, and then we do the next part, and then we do the next part. This doesn't happen anymore in Germany. I know it's very open and transparent and flexible. And he said, but what we call the First Nations, or the indigenous people of North America, is that they almost all had a culture of modeling. So you have a thing called toilet training, right? Children, everybody knows what that is, right? Or anybody not? Okay, so you teach your children how to go to the bathroom, right? And the European model, for the most part, is, okay, now you get your little pull-up pants, you get to do that, and and then we're gonna train you to sit on the toilet, and then we work through, and we have a program, and and over a period of time, the child knows how to go to the bathroom. The First Nations model is, what we do is we model the behavior. So mommy and daddy go to the bathroom, they do it. And then over time, the child says, I want to be like mommy or daddy. And they do it. And what's interesting is it takes the same period of time, except it's way less stressful. And if you think about a lot of our training programs, is that in a lot of cases, we just need to model the behavior. Why do people dress as they do? Right? I mean, it's because that's the way other people dress. Why do, we subconsciously model behavior. We don't even think about, as humans, we want to fit in. We want peer. Why do all hipsters look alike? Right? Why do they all have, beards and drink lattes or whatever it is, right? Why do they have smashed avocado on toast? That was big in North America. I haven't had smashed avocado here yet. But modeling is a very powerful force. In a lot of cases, it costs us a lot less than trying to shape people because we are natural modelers. So here, I talked about errors and insights. So Gary Klein, basically, this is his model. He wrote a great book called Seeing What Others Don't. Gary's a psychologist. And Gary said, okay, performance improvement is these two things. If you want your company, your organization to work better, right? It's reduce errors and increase insights. But, okay, does anybody in their workplace have any things in place to increase their insights for people? And, you think so the blue stuff, how many work in organizations or have worked in organizations that have stuff in the blue? Okay. How about stuff in the green? Do you have ways of increasing curiosity, of helping people see coincidences and do something about it? The making more connections, right? Seeing contradictions and doing something about it. All right? Having ways to deal with creative desperation. Or, you think about it, I got a report due tomorrow, okay? Creative desperation is, well, if I'm in a culture that does not accept failure, then I will go with what works. I will go with what's been done before. I won't try anything new. If I'm in an open culture, I may actually try something completely different, right? Which is what a freelancer or an independent person might do. Right? But if you're working in a constrained culture, it's like, I'm not sticking my head out there because I might lose my job. Right? So training and job aids help a lot to reduce errors, and we're good at that. But it's informal and social learning that helps to increase those insights. And PKM will talk about that. This is a framework that I have developed to address particularly those three aspects of that. All this stuff is, you've got the access to this, plus it's all on my website. So this is Harold's universal theory of everything. Okay? So I'm humble. It's because I had a client who called it that. So she also called it the 3-bubble model. So we're only the 2 bubbles. But if you think about work and how it's done, is that in most workplaces, right, is that we create value in a structured way, which makes sense, right? And we collaborate. We get things done, right? And that's the way, and that makes sense. And I don't think that's ever going to change, right? You're not going to do a major project on Facebook, right? That's not the place. You're going to do it in a structured, controlled way. You're not going to build a bridge, on social media. Right? So things that have to get done, we have to work them. We create value. But at the other end, right, the other end of the spectrum there, where things are unstructured and we're learning new things, that's where innovation comes from, right? And that's in those loose connections, wandering around, serendipity, doing that, and that's where we connect with others. The challenge is connecting those two things, right? Because quite often is that I'm down, I do my work, and then I go out, and I go on social media, and I meet with people, and I read books, and I do stuff, and that's kind of interesting. But how do we put that together, particularly in workplaces that are complex and things are changing? right? How do we connect those two bubbles? And part of it is through communities of practice, through communities. A community of practice is not a network, which is loose and open, and it's not a work team, but it's with people who are focused on improving their practice. I say that you know that you're in a community of practice when it changes your practice. So how many people belong to a community of practice? Me, I run one. I'm members of 3 or 4 different ones. Some are face to face and whatever. But you think about the thing is that you have you need to be connected to the world. That's why I hope I'm using the German words right, the Gesellschaft. But you also need to be working with people who are trying to accomplish similar things. And it's that. But if you're only down in the bottom, you're in an echo chamber. And if you're only out in the top, you're never getting anything done. And it's how do you then connect those things together? What's that flow? And in a work day, you may be in all 3 of those spaces. And you notice there's overlap between those bubbles, right? Because there's fuzzy stuff. This is a complex model, right? Things are fuzzy. It's all, oh, this is an A and this is a B. Well, this is a sometimes A and sometimes B. So, this is how we connect. This is the personal knowledge mastery model. This is how we put it together, right? Is it how do I get interesting ideas out there in the green? How do I make sense of them? Quite often I have to do that in a trusted community because I don't want to stick my head out on Twitter and have 5,000 trolls beat me, which if we have time, I'll tell a story on that because that's happened to me. And even, as having been doing this a long time, it hurts. How do we promote the learning? How do we actually learn as opposed to doing the work? And then how do we get down and make sense of that? So if you start, seek new knowledge, make sense of the knowledge, share those lessons and share what's being learned out. And this is the high level of the model. There's a whole bunch of layers to it, such as knowing when to share, how to share, with whom to share, right? There's confidentiality, intellectual property, all those things get sort of mixed in there. So there's no single model.